Hello, everybody. This is Fabienne from Therapy Center Apex Aquila Swiss at the beautiful lake of Zurich. The sun is shining, and I decided to take some time and talk to you about some questions I was asked from parents and about comments they received from other healthcare practitioners. And one of these topics is the whole discussion about evidence-based practice. So I had parents, they asked me, why is it that I see all these treatment modalities, such as TheraSuit, Theratog, Phases, or NISTIP? Why do I see, and DMI, of course, why do I see all of these treatment modalities, but whenever I speak to some other healthcare practitioners or to insurances, they say, yeah, but it's not evidence-based. And then they look at me and they say, but Fabienne, it works. It seems to work. So what's going on? And I'm here today to hopefully answer this question or give you a better insight. So let's talk about evidence-based practice. Evidence-based practice consists of three circles, three elements. So we have the first circle is what the research says. So research, okay, that's number one. Let's go to the second circle. I hope you can see that. The second circle is what the family expectation is or the patient expectation. In our case, the children maybe cannot really judge or judge what is best. So here, we're just gonna write parent expectation, okay? And then in the third circle, we have what I think as an expert, as a clinician, what works, what evidence-based is, okay? So that's me. So let's say expert, clinician. Also, and this explains why you might say, this therapy method is not evidence-based practice, but then at the same time, it seems to work. Again, why? Because evidence-based practice is the area that overlaps here of research, parent expectation, and what I think as a clinician expert that works. So why is that, especially in physical therapy? One of the issues, it starts to get better, but one of the issues we have in the physical therapy setting is that it's very difficult to standardize research. It's difficult to standardize experiments, right? Because so let's say we do an experiment with, is DMI better than any other like traditional physical therapy, neurological? It's very difficult because every clinician has its own spin on things. So that's one bias, right? And then what happens in the end is that, and that was really frustrating while I did my attend my postgrad program. For all of us, often the conclusion of the experiment was the evidence is not conclusive. So that means we don't know, and more research is needed, higher quality research is needed. So that's why we go into this, where we take the research. And again, research here should be highest level of evidence, which is a systematic review. And the systematic review can give us a good idea of what works best. But even so, if the quality of the studies is not that great, the ones who will have a great quality will show up in the research articles. But things like a TheraSuit, as I said, Theratogs, there hasn't been a lot of research done so far. Whereas in robotics, where we have private companies and technology, there is simply more funding for that. There are investors who are interested in that topic. But for other, a bit less fancy things that seem to work, like Theratogs, cases, knee stim. It's just difficult to get money to do this kind of research. Okay. So that's why maybe that would explain why we know that there are some treatment techniques that seem to work, but the evidence is not there. Okay. So that's the first part. Again, as I said, research, expectation, and what I think as a clinician it works. Especially because from a research point of view, there is partially a lack of quality. Okay. Voila, And then, so that was the first part that I wanted to discuss. So now let's go to the next part. What should you say to someone who tells you, oh, but that's not evidence-based, that doesn't work? One argument is that you tell this practitioner or whoever healthcare practitioner that might be, it's not that it's not evidence-based. It's just that there hasn't been any research done yet. Full stop. But empirically, and empirically means what we observe as parents, as practitioners, for example, for DMI or Theratogs or TheraSuit, what we see in clinic and what you maybe see in videos on Instagram. This is what we see and we observe it and we can see that it works, right? And that's what we call empirical evidence. So now from these empirical evidence, it's important that we start to gather data, right? What we do here at the Apex Aquila Swiss as well. And we need to start to write case reports. And from that point, we can then start to gather enough case reports and data that maybe at some point we can come up with research for Theratogs and DMI, right? But for now, there is not a lot of evidence because no research has been done yet on that topic. For the mentioned reason, that there's no funding for it, and also that there are maybe not enough experts in the area. Okay, so that is that you can tell your healthcare practitioner. And the second thing, again, is the empirical evidence that I saw it with my eye. And it's not just once happening, it happened a lot of times. So yeah, that is that for the evidence-based practice. So if you have any questions about that topic, let me know. It's interesting. And next time when a healthcare practitioner expert tells you, oh, it's not evidence-based practice, think about the 3 circles, right? And where they overlap. And this is evidence-based practice. Okay, great. So now let's continue. Why do some of these techniques, like the TheraSuit, the Theratog, DMI, and TASES, why could they potentially work for children, even though it's not evidence-based? When we look at evidence-based practice, we have things like robotics, we have CIMT, so constraint-induced movement therapy, where, let's say, if you have a child who is hemiparetic, so one side affected with cerebral palsy, we want the child to use the hand that is affected more. So we constrain the left hand, and with it can be with a cast or with tape, right? Or we just bind it around his trunk and force it in a way to play and use his hand more. And there are protocols about it, and I think it's amazing. It's really good. What I think is then lacking in that scenario because it's not just the function that is affected or the motivation to use the hand. It's also all the muscles of the shoulder, the biceps, triceps, rotator cuff, or the flexor extensor muscles, the hand muscles. All of these needs to be trained as well. So taking this example from CIMT and the hand muscles to the rest of the body when it comes to robotics, I think it's great that we have robotics. I think, and there is evidence, again, that robotics seem to work for hands as well as legs. But my question then is the robotic is great to learn new movement patterns, yes, which is walking. I know that contractions can be reduced because you have the tissues that move. You have cortical changes that lead to a reduction in tone, and that these usually, let's say, the usual stiffer tissues, they can start to relax. Basically, we know that, but are they getting stronger? And how about the more foundational, such as the so-called central pattern generators? So central pattern generators are circles inside the brain and the spinal cord that, when we are born, they get activated, and the child starts to move with these central pattern regulators. That's number one. And from these central pattern generators, it moves, which are involuntary movements. That's why you see the baby moving in all directions in the beginning, from 0 to 4, and then 4 months. And from 4 months onward, it starts to grab to something. It starts to do more voluntary movements. So yes, this is crucial for the development as well. And we can help, and from observation, we can help to improve these involuntary movements necessary for the voluntary movements when we work with, for example, DMI, right? So we trigger these foundational movements. Okay. So as a next part, we have the theratogs. Why do theratogs potentially work? Beverly Kuzik came up with theratogs 25 years ago, and she has a fantastic course which is called Developmental Orthopedics. And in this training, you learn about the biomechanical and muscle and bone development of a baby to a 10-year-old. And it's fascinating to learn about the center of gravity, what the importance is of that, and how important alignment is for the whole body, right? And this is where Theratogs was built, because we know that from a sensory point of view, the human organism needs to know where it starts and where it finishes. So the Theratog gives a child, in a way, boundaries, because we know that children with low muscle tone, they don't know where they start and where they end, because they're lacking movements. So the connection from the body to the brain are movements, right? They're lacking movements that could help to connect the brain and the body, okay? Even though it's one unit, but the signal enhancer is not there. So the Theratog takes over, and the child wears it on its body. And while the child wears it on its body, it increases the sensory input, the afferent input up to the brain. So imagine it's a little bit like when you see the world from above in space in the night, and it turns night, and then the lights go on the different continents. Then suddenly you see the shape of the continents. And this is what the Theratog does. It just helps to improve the representation of the body to the brain, and then the child feels itself better, body awareness, right? So that's the first point. The next point is the biomechanical alignment. So when let's say you have a hypotonic child, it's rounded, sitting, the muscles on the back are too long, the muscles in the front are too short. The issue we have there is, even if the child is working with his hands and, for example, lift up something, usually this is a lot of core work, right? So when I'm upright, and I lift this up, a lot of core work. When the child has a rounded back, this is not that much core work anymore. Why? Because the muscle has muscle, the muscle has elements, contractile elements that are responsible to generate energy. In that case, the longer muscle fibers, so the longer the muscles on the back, the further apart are these contractile elements, the sarcomeres. So it's somewhere here. If they're too close to each other, somewhere here, then they cannot generate the full energy as well. So what we need to do, we need to make sure that these contractile elements are in the sweet spot somewhere here. And this is what we do when, for example, we are using a strap. So it could be the top right strap. Yeah. The top right strap acts then as a muscle, and we put it on the back. So Maxley here, for example, he has the strap on. He has this cross right strap, top right, voila. And it helps then to open up the chest, lengthen the muscles in the front, bring them to the sweet spot, that when the child is playing on the ground, can fully generate, the muscle can generate strength at full capacity. Okay, so that is that. And ideally, the child should wear Theratog every day at home. It's a management that we have this carryover effect, that we have these long-standing changes in the cortical as well as body muscles and joints. Okay, so that is that. So can you see how, even though a Theratog is not evidence-based and DMI, the principles that the DMI and Theratog is based on is evidence-based. We know that this is how the body works, okay? So neuroplastic changes and sweet spot of muscles. A muscle that is too short is a weak muscle, right? A muscle that is too long is a weak muscle. So I find this evidence-based practice discussion interesting for that reason. That we think it's better just to refuse or reject a treatment modality just because there hasn't been done any research yet. And we say, no, it's not evidence-based, right? And we just, we do not acknowledge the fact that some of these treatment modalities have simply not, that there hasn't been any work done yet. Interesting. Personally, I wrote a proposal for a PhD about vestibular organ and neurological question, and I couldn't find a supervisor. It's interesting. I wanted to do some research within DMI, but it's really hard to find someone who could help me and guide me within that topic. Yeah, so vestibular organ and DMI. If there's anybody out there who can support me in that mission, because I'm very curious about the effects of DMI on the vestibular organ when it comes to motor impairments. This is, I think it's very, very interesting. So anyway, that was that. I think I covered that pretty well. Maybe I can also speak about TheraSuit quickly. Yeah, so what the TheraSuit does is, to me, it's the therapy alternative to the Theratog. Yeah, so I tell the parents that Theratog you wear at home. Home management, therapy you can wear. And the TheraSuit is something we use in clinic. If I have children that struggle due to spasticity or due to muscle weakness, or contractures to do certain movements, I can use the TheraSuit, which is stronger than Theratog and helps with the alignment and gives a lot of input to the brain via these elastics. And the elastics, in a way, they represent the muscles. So here, for example, on the back, I have the back extensors, I have the glutes, so the buttock muscles, and then here in the front, I have the obliques, right? And then here I have the abs, the abdominal muscles. So the TheraSuit enhances the strength and the alignment even more than the Theratog. And I can use it in clinic. And what I really like as well is that the TheraSuit, and I did that with Charlie quite a bit already, and with other kiddos with the head control issues, because in the end, head control is not just about the strength. It's also a proprioception coordination problem, because these children from the beginning, it took some time for them to be upright. When they were in prone, they didn't have enough strength to lift up the head. The system, the joints, the joint receptors, the receptors of the ligaments, of the tendons, they never really sent the proper signal up to the brain. So the brain gets a little bit confused what to do with his head as soon we take this child and we put it in a chair, right? And then we end up children having they literally seek for that correct activation of the muscles, and they rely on the capsule. So on the capsule ligamentous apparatus. So that's why I think it's really fascinating. I will post some videos on our channel later as well, where I work with children using the TheraSuit head and the compression that it gives. By the way, the compression component is also important with TheraSuit because it increases the information sharing from the receptors of the joints and the brain. We know that from PNF, from proprioceptive neurofacilitation. This concept, again, you see, so PNF is evidence-based, and we use the principles from the PNF, so approximation of joints, with the TheraSuit. So can you see how everything is in a way linked? And that we cannot say just because it's not evidence-based, because again, when there's no research been done or not enough, or the quality is not good, the evidence is inconclusive. We cannot say. So I also think we cannot say that it's not evidence-based. That's just, yeah, it's not evidence-based. But when we have empirical evidence that it works, I find it a bit difficult to understand, right? So we have this, and I think it's an amazing tool, and it just, together with the spider cage, for example, it really helps the child to feel his body in a new way. That's why I also work with braces, so with knee immobilizers. Why? Because we want to give the child the experience, what it means to be upright. So now you could say, why don't we just put them in a standing frame? Again, I'm not against standing frames. I think it's great to have standing frames, and it's important for many reasons, for the hip development, for digestion, respiratory. My issue with the standing frames and these adaptive chairs is the child cannot explore movement. And the only time the child can explore movement is when it lies on the floor or when it's in a therapy setting, right? But even then, the therapist only has two hands, or maybe it has someone who helps him, but it's just really, really difficult to have them upright. So they never really have the chance to explore. And this is where these systems come into play. And this system comes into play. But I mean, the Chattanooga, it does already much more things. But in the end, we want to give the experience. And then from a vestibular point of view, the child is upright, and then it starts to move, and it gets so much proprioceptive input. It experiences gravity. And this is what then also gives the motivation for the child to be upright. Because before, it's just annoying and it's difficult to be upright. And why should I be upright? But suddenly, I had children here in the spider cage when they were wearing the TheraSuit or the Theratog, and we're using the tasers, and we started to gently squat and up, like a mini squat and up, mini squat up. And it was so beautiful to see that this GMFCS5 labeled child, also from the gross motor function measure. So the worst level, where the child can only be in a wheelchair, and hopefully, if possible, it can learn to manipulate the hand switch. When this child was standing here and suddenly started to bend and get up and bend and up and bend and up, it was amazing. There was so much happening here. Was it evidence-based that the child was wearing these systems and being in a cage? Is it in this in the Novak article, in the systematic review? No, no, it's not there, or is not recommended. But I bet that this child got so much sensory input and motivation and self-efficacy, and it was so rich from a sensory point of view that I have issues to call such methods not evidence-based, even though if they're not evidence-based. Again, we had this discussion. So to conclude, I could talk hours and hours, right? I could also talk about this because it's amazing, right? That's why we use it here. And this is our goal here at Apex Aquila Swiss. We want to be the forerunners when it comes to implementing empirically observed therapy methods that work, right? And always individualized and customized to the child. And what we use are our reasoning skills, our knowledge from anatomy, biomechanics, neurology, neuropsychology, and we mix everything together and come up with a treatment plan. So if you are interested, if your child maybe could also change some of, or add some of these treatment techniques in his treatment management plan, reach out, book a free consultation, and please also don't forget to subscribe to our channel, right? You can find us on TikTok, you can find us on Instagram, and you can find us on YouTube, and click on the button. We would love your support, and that I can continue share these news, and hopefully contribute to the well-being and quality of life of the children. Okay, good. That said, I wish you a lovely day, and thanks so much for having me. Bye.